Hi, welcome to my videos on the AQA Year 2 Psychology topic, and I'll be starting with forensic psychology. The purpose of these videos is not to replace your learning in class, it is to enhance that. So the idea is that you watch the video before you come into class, you have an understanding of the topic that we're doing, and therefore you can build on that with your evaluation and understanding. And it means that you are learning it almost twice, because it means you're watching the video, understanding it, learning it, and then coming to class and working on your evaluation skills and anything that doesn't make sense. I'm going to be using this book, commonly known as the Pink-Haired Girl book, and all the information that I'm going through today comes from this book. Okay, so the first topic I'm going to start with is offender profiling, and I find that offender profiling and forensic psychology is the topic that students are interested in doing the most. I get people coming to enrolment and saying, what do we do in psychology? When are we doing crime? So we're going to start off with offender profiling. Now, offender profiling is an investigative tool that the police and profilers use to try and figure out who the criminal might be. It doesn't tell you exactly who the person is. What it does is it gives you a list of probable characteristics that that person might have, such as how old they are, what kind of job they might have, where they might live, so that the police can then try and figure out who has committed the crime. There are two approaches to offender profiling. The first is the top-down approach, and the second is the bottom-up approach. The top-down approach was developed by the USA in the 1970s by the FBI Behavioural Unit. And it took data from interviews with serial killers like Ted Bundy and Charles Manson to have a picture of what's going on in the criminal's mind, and try and build up sort of set characteristics. And they came up with two separate profiles of criminals. The first is an organised criminal. The second is a disorganised criminal. Every criminal has what we call a modus operandi, which is basically their mode of operation. How do they actually commit the crime? And every offender will have a different way of doing this, and likes and dislikes. They all do things differently. And therefore, the idea is that they can use this modus operandi to then try and find this criminal. So you might have had a spate of murders across the US in different counties, and they might say, oh, this person has tied them up, this person has sexually assaulted them, is there any link between these two crimes? So what the MO tells us is details about the criminal themselves, what they're like in their everyday life when they're not murdering people, and then this can try and link to them, and we can try and figure out who that person is. So, an organised offender would plan the crime beforehand. They would have an idea of what they were going to do, how they were going to do it, who they were going to do it to. They very much have a type. Love Island fans, not their type on paper. What we mean by that is their type as in what kind of victim they might want to attack. So they might always attack ladies with brunette hair or blonde hair, or prostitutes. So an organised offender would deliberately target a specific person for a specific reason. Organised offenders tend to leave little evidence or clues at the crime scene. They tend to have an idea of where they're going to do it. They might clear up beforehand, afterwards. They might take the murder weapon away. They might have brought the murder weapon with them. Organised offenders tend to be of above average intelligence. They tend to have a skilled or a professional occupation. They generally seem quite normal in their everyday lives. They might be married, they might have children. They don't typify with any social or sexual problems. They tend to seem quite normal. So those people you see on the news, and they interview friends and family, and they say things like, they were really lovely, I can't believe they've done this, nobody would have ever guessed it of them. That would be an organised offender. For example, Ted Bundy, he had very much a type of victim. He took out the passenger seat of his VW Beetle. He would wear a sling on his arm, carrying some books, and he would approach female victims on campus, ask them to help him, and then attack them as they got to his car. So he very much had his own MO of how he would get his victims, who he would choose, and what he would do to them. The opposite of this is a disorganised offender. The clue's in the name. An organised offender is organised, a disorganised offender is not. They don't plan their crime, might be very much a spur of the moment. The crime scene reveals a very impulsive nature of them. It might be very messy, there might be evidence everywhere, they might have left a body, they might have left a murder weapon, whereas an organised offender would try and cover up their tracks, and a disorganised offender would not. They tend to have a lower than average IQ, be unskilled, be in unskilled work or unemployment. They tend to have had relationship problems or sexual dysfunction, and this is why they've started attacking women. It is usually women, and they might have had lots of relationship problems, and then that has brought out anger, and they might be then taking out that frustration out on women, other women that they don't know. Disorganised offenders also tend to live alone and close to the crime scene. The opposite of the top-down model, so that's the top-down approach, where you have your two types of criminals and then you try to figure out which one this crime scene belongs in. The bottom-up approach is the British model. The British model does not have any preconceptions about who the criminal might be. They use evidence from the crime scene to try and build up a picture of who the offender is. All offenders are totally different. They all do things very differently, although they might have the same end result, and therefore the British model assumes that we can't typify people into one or two categories. So what they aim to do is establish a pattern of behaviour which they can then put in the database, and then they can try and see if there is a correlation or a link between other crimes in the area. Sometimes we do have offenders who commit crime and they've never committed a crime before, so we have no DNA, we have no blood, and therefore we don't know who they are. So by doing this, we can try and see if it is a serial offender or if it is just a one-off crime. The core theory in the way that the bottom-up approach works is that the offender will carry out things in the crime scene that reflect how they are in real life. So things like being very controlling in the crime scene, perhaps tying the offender up, might be a sexual fantasy that they have, then that might reflect in their everyday life. Time and place is a key factor in bottom-up profiling. It's really, really important. It's important to the offender, so the time that they've committed the crime, where they've committed the crime. That tells us a lot about who the offender might be. For example, if they always commit the crime in the same place, is that a particular area that's special to them? Has something happened there before? Another key factor is geographical profiling, which can help us figure out where the offender lives. If you imagine there's been lots of crimes in a particular area, then that might suggest that the offender lives nearby. Geographical profiling was developed by Kim Rossmo in 1997, which uses information to do with the location of several crime scenes to make inferences about where the offender might live. So they might put all the crime scenes on a map, might map it all out, and then they might see, is there a common theme with these? Are they all like so much distance away from a place? This gives them what they call a centre of gravity. So you imagine that's where the offender lives and all these crimes are happening around it. It also gives them a jeopardy surface. And so if you imagine you've got the offender lives here and you've got 3, 4, 5 crimes going on over here, that might suggest that the offender might strike there again. And then the police can use that information to try and prevent any further crimes from happening. Cantor and Larkin in 1993 proposed two models of offender behaviour, marauder and commuter. A marauder would commit a crime very close to home, so very similar to the disorganised offender, but we're not assuming any characteristics about that person. All we're saying is that they commit crimes close to home. Whereas a commuter would commute, they would travel to the crime scene. And then that again might suggest that they might live nearby, or they might live within a certain travelling distance of this particular location. So the police can use these models to try and find the person who's committed the crimes. Thank you for watching my video, and I hope it's been helpful. Please let me know if you've got any questions by either bringing them to class, or if you're new to these videos and I'm not your teacher, then please feel free to leave a comment. Thank you.